Zibai has been out, I've been testing her a ton, and I'm gonna share with you all that I found concerning her best teams. So sit back, relax, hit the like button, and let's explore Zibai's top setups. First, we're gonna start things off guns blazing with Zibai's absolute strongest team, what I like to call Hypercarry Zibai. I call it this as this comp is completely broken. It's a combination of all the best buffs you could possibly want, resulting in having a very big lead across all of Zibai's teams. This is thanks to every single character being crucial to Zibai. Doing much of the heavy lifting is Columbina, smoothing Zibai's rotations immensely, all the while bestowing a massive 40% boost to Lunar Crystallize. An interesting bonus of Bina is that in Zibai's teams, there's a side of her that is utilized that's almost never used. Nevertheless, Columbina's impact is huge here, as is Lua's. Simply put, Lua is an essential support. It may seem like Aino is the only 4-star on the banner, but you need to get him if you can. He's the perfect support doing miracles for Zibai and the team. From massively boosting everyone's Geo and Crystallize damage, to buffing Geo characters' crit rate and crit damage. Lua truly does it all, practically making every Crystallize team eons better. At last is someone that is oftentimes forgotten when it comes to Zibai, Gorou. While we all look toward Lua to buff Zibai, and rightfully so, fundamentally Zibai scales off of defense, and there is no better defense buffer than Gorou. Think of him as the Bennett for Geo. By his skill alone, Gorou adds nearly 400 defense to Zibai, a crazy buff that can turn any defense scaler into a monster. He additionally gives 15% Geo damage to the party, and better yet, if your pulls went well, which let me know how they went, my pulls thankfully went really good. At C6, Gorou boosts Zibai's crit damage by 40%. These buffs are enormous and drastically elevate Zibai's damage. Behind Lua, Gorou hands down is Zibai's best buffer. With this trio, legitimately, no enemy stands a chance. You'll wipe the floor with everyone, inflicting 200k to probably at max 400k crystallizes. But while these supports are strong on their own, a major side to their buffs is their artifacts. To hone in on Zibai reaching her highest potential, you need to get their artifacts right, which I'll break down for all of you. Real quick, Bina wants to equip Albedo of Morningstar and Moon, and yes, even if the pieces are a little scuffed. Oftentimes, Bina is tied to Silk and Moon and operates as a mere buffer, yet with two other characters, Columbina is free to use another set that taps into her personal DPS. This yields a nice damage gain as Columbina can hit hard. Moreover, with Zibai dealing the bulk of damage, having a source of damage in the background makes a big difference. For Lua, I recommend running Silk and Moon Serenade and Gorou on Instructor. It's worth mentioning that it's actually somewhat better if these two swap their sets. Instructor grants higher elemental mastery on Lua and therefore greater buffs. The drawback, however, is Lua suffers from energy issues, especially in Stygian Onslaught. As such, I lean on Silk and Moon to completely solve the issue, but in truth, it really doesn't matter on who uses what. The vital thing is simply having these sets in the team. Now, as dominating as the first team is, it suffers from a key flaw, the lack of a sustainer. This can make or break the squad. Zibai is vulnerable to every single attack. She can tank some of the hits considering her loads of defense, but this is not at all the case for her teammates. Beyond keeping everyone alive, a healer is practically required to reach Zibai's utmost power, as one of her deadliest swords is Harbinger of Dawn. It has an abundance of crit, but half of its crit requires Zibai remain above 90% health. With good enough artifacts, you can take the loss of 28% less crit rate, but if this is not for you, keeping her health is paramount. Therefore, we trade Gorou for the OGGU unit Zhongli, forming our next best team. Zhongli and Zibai as a duo is one of my favorites. Zibai becomes so easy to play, you don't have to worry about her health decreasing, you can just spam her attacks and admire her pretty animations. But it's not all sunshines and meteors falling from the sky. Zhongli takes a noticeable hit to the team's DPS. Nothing big enough to scare you away from him, but thankfully there's a number of ways to retain as much DPS as possible, and this stems from the artifacts you use. A popular set on Zhongli is Instructor, and this completely follows. The team is oriented around Lunar Crystallize, and Instructor is a prime set to buff Lunar damage. Even so, after a number of tests, I'm happy to say that this is not at all Zhongli's best artifact. Yes, the set does turn him into a remarkable buffer, but his damage with Instructor is next to nothing, and this is no exaggeration. He straight up looks like 5-star Aino out there. His damage is so poor that any buff to Lunar Crystallize is offset by his non-existent damage. Thus, Zhongli's best build is to give him his personality back, get Grandpa back on his feet, and focus on his personal damage. This will give you mountains of extra DPS. Not only as Zhongli himself can deal some high hits, Illuga is more than capable of helping him do this considering his amazing geo buffs. There's multiple ways to build Zhongli for this role. I've tested all of them, and the number one build was Nuke Zhongli. This was a big joy for me, as for years I've built him like this, lied to myself that it was worth it. No, I'm just kidding, it definitely was worth it, but finally a team made this build truly shine. He easily hits for 100k ultimates, netting you a big damage gain right away, but even after his burst, his damage is still consistent, especially if you give him attack percentage for his pillar resonance. You can flip this completely upside down, grabbing onto 4 golden troop for the highest skill damage. This strat is basically death by 1000 cuts, as though his one pillar is not at all anything special. It can extend to all the constructs and moon drifts on the field, equating to 20k damage dealt every 2 seconds. Truth be told, while the skill build does lose out to the burst variation, I regard the two as equal. The damage difference between them is not at all anything significant, so you can use whatever you prefer or already have. Next, let's talk about some alternative teams, but before that, I just ask that you take a quick second to like the video and possibly subscribe. This helps me out a great deal, benefits the channel immensely, and would mean a lot. As instrumental as Illuga is to Zibai's max potential, the chances of getting a 4-star is stupidly low. You could straight up get a 5-star before you even get the 4-star you want, and I know for a fact there's some of you watching that are in this position, but do not worry, I've got you covered. While you may lack Illuga, there is actually a remarkable number of teams you can turn to. A prime example is our third team. This setup is very powerful. Not only does it outdamage the Zhongli comp to take second place, it unbelievably came very close to the first team's DPS. This I could not believe. I redid the tests over and over again. This seemed way too good to be true, but the results were the same. Upon analyzing this team, this does make sense, however. To fill in the gap of not having Illuga, slotting in a sub DPS is the best course of action. Their damage makes a big difference, especially in Zibai's team, but next to Zibai, you have the perfect situation. Gorou will already be part of the team, and not gonna lie, he carries this team. He will have Silken Moon to buff Zibai, while his kit's defense and crit damage supercharges both Zibai and any sub DPS you may have. Albedo is my preferred pick. He's the perfect blend of damage and buffing. On the one hand, he'll give you upwards of 40 to 50k skill hits, big for any team, and on the other hand, he secretly has Silken Moon inside his sleeves. Normally, you never want to touch his burst, but in Lunar teams, you totally should. Unleashing it brings about 100 EM boost, something everyone will make great use of, especially Zibai for deadlier Crystallizes. Choosing Albedo is never a bad idea, but the same can be said for Chiori. She's better than Albedo, at least in regards to sheer damage output. For buffing, she doesn't come close to him. Now, before some of you delete the game because you have Illuga instead of Gorou, Illuga can totally be played instead of Gorou. Do keep in mind though that seeing as Illuga's kit is more Lunar Crystallize based, he doesn't buff Albedo as much, leading to weaker DPS. Still, playing him is more than viable, as is another sub DPS I did not expect to be so good, Yelan. While we tend to focus on Geo sub DPSs for Zibai, there's a whole lineup of Hydra damage healers applicable to Zibai, the greatest being Yelan. Though her passive hits won't always be triggered by Zibai, outside of Zibai's Spirit Stride and Elemental Burst, she constantly normal attacks, so you still get great use out of Yelan's burst. And of course, on top of her Hydra hits, Yelan has her damage raising passive, which, if I'm not mistaken, does not apply to Lunar Crystallize, but all the same, it will buff Zibai's damage nonetheless. Moving on, let's shift over to other notable compositions. Up front, I've got an honorable mention in Lunar Charge Crystallize, and yes, you heard me right. While you absolutely want to abide by Zibai's team passive of having Hydro and Geo teammates, there's some leeway in it. Specifically, if the fourth teammate is a non-Geo or a Hydro, you do not lose out on much damage, and you can make up for it with a very strong unit, of whom there is no one better than Anefa. Pairing Anefa with Zibai, to this day, I still regret not getting Anefa. In my memory, try this team out. It won't be her number one team, but easily one of her best. Both of them are so good, their power alone will carry the team. Okay, the next teams are for those of you down in the dumps. Banners have just not treated you well, and your team situation looks chalked. For whatever case you're in, or if the next team doesn't apply to you, there's always the banner team. It's not one of Zibai's strongest teams, it's mostly there, really all it just lacks is Columbina, but if Aino's all you got, there's no better team than this. Now, if the banner cursed you, you have no Gorou nor Illuga, but C12 Aino, one, you have my condolences, but all hope is not lost. If you don't have Bina either, then there is definitely no hope. But with Columbina, we can deploy one of the best Crystallize teams I found in my Columbina team guide, which you should totally watch, I swear it's good. A Xilo and Farina team. This team is deceptively good. It's so easy to categorize them as nothing more than damage buffers, but they're a tsunami of buffing and damage. The best thing about Xilonen is her reduction to geo damage. She applies a major geo shred to all enemies, furthering the damage of Crystallize by a great deal. She also heals at the same time, and this duo of shredding and healing makes Xilonen emerge as an amazing sustainer for Zibai. But in the midst of all these positives, Xilonen isn't used due to the restrictions of her kit. Alongside Itlua and Zibai, she won't properly apply her buffs, as at C0, 3 geos in a team effectively cancel out her buffs. Only at C2 is she usable with Zibai. Though a big bummer, at the very least in this specific comp, she does extremely well, as does Farina. Farina's addition is passive damage, which when you factor in Columbina's passive attacks and the Hydra Resonance taking effect, grants you a ton of easy damage. But Farina's biggest addition is the overflux of geo damage bonus, with Xilonen Cinder City as a cherry on the top. Yes, we did go over how this is not the primary buff you want on Zibai, but you should know a very unique thing about her. Her geo attacks make up a prominent portion of her overall damage, bigger than Flynn's or Nefer's. This by no means makes geo damage her best stat, but it's by no means useless either. With the droves of damage bonus the composition provides, it makes a noticeable difference to her damage, so much so that this team is so much better than the last. If you can use this, 100% opt for this. Even crazier is that at high investment, this team gets quite close to matching the strength of some of Zibai's best teams. Well everyone, this is the team guide. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, please consider liking and subscribing, and be sure to ask me any questions you have on her. Thanks for watching.